Well, good morning, Kentucky Farm Bureau. I'm honored to be here today. As you can see, I am not Zippy Duval. He sends his best. He was unable to make it this week, but I was so happy that Jeff and the team invited me to speak this morning so that we could give Undersecretary Northey the time that he deserved at the commodity lunch on Thursday. So happy to be here. Happy birthday. You know, we've said it before, we've been celebrating all year long. I'll say it again, not many organizations sustain themselves and grow with influence over 100 years. And you may have heard me say this back at the Kentucky State Fair, but if you go back in time 100 years, we had a World Series fiasco. We also, the price of bread was 9 cents a loaf, and the most famous entertainer in the world was Charlie Chaplin. And I like to tell people, wasn't it refreshing when our celebrities were silent filmmakers? I also want to say a sincere thank you for allowing me to have an opportunity to continue to serve. As you know, this past year was an election year. The elections are behind us, and a lot of you went out of your way to help out with my candidacy. I drove 60,000 miles this year without leaving Kentucky, visited all 120 counties, and I just want to say a sincere thank you from the heart for allowing us to continue with a second term. So thank you all so much. Now, before we get started, there is a particular group of folks that I want to say thank you to. If anyone here is from Scott County Farm Bureau, would you please stand up at this time? I just want to say thank you for helping raise me. And more importantly, thank you for helping raise my brother first. I appreciate that. Farm Bureau has been something really special to me. I was able to participate in the Outstanding Youth Contest when I was growing up. I was able to go to Washington, D.C. That was one of my first exposures to our capital, and seeing how legislation makes its way through not only at the national capital, but the state house, as well as our courthouses across Kentucky. And it's so, I cannot emphasize enough how effective your team is in Frankfort. A lot of times we have to make sure that we work together. You know, we're 2% of the population, and a lot of times you have to remind folks that if you don't speak up, sometimes you get left out, especially when it comes to public policy making. And so I can't emphasize enough how effective we are making sure that we work together for what's best for Kentucky agriculture. 2019, no bones about it, very tough production year. As I said on Thursday, we had a very wet spring, then followed by a drought. The further east you went in Kentucky, the drier it got. We're experiencing forage shortages right now. We're experiencing some issues with tobacco in the market this week. There's always issues with hemp, and we're working on an issue that just came to light to my office down in Meade County right now. So we hope to continue to work before the end of this calendar year to try to figure some issues out. In Frankfort, we have some changes. On Tuesday, we'll have a new governor, Governor-elect Andy Beshear, and I really do wish him the best of success. His administration's success means Kentucky has success, and so we've already have met with him and his team on some transition issues and identified some things that we can work on together. I also want to thank Governor Matt Bevin for his service to the Commonwealth. He entrusted Warren Beeler in a very, very influential area in Kentucky state government, and we're going to see what we can do to continue to have that influence in Kentucky. It's also going to, yeah, you can clap. Yeah. As mentioned earlier, we have a session starting on January 7th. I get sworn back in on January 6th. There are a lot of issues, and oftentimes in agriculture, just on the like on the national levels, which Leader McConnell will be addressing you all later this morning, agriculture is more about playing defense than it is offense. A lot of times it's stopping bad ideas in its track than promoting what we need, and unfortunately it's just that way. And across the nation, you're starting to see that. The state of Arizona only has one legislator in both the House and the Senate who actually farms. And if you look at what's going on the coast, a lot of times there's anti-agriculture legislation that gets passed year in and year out. But here in Kentucky, we are so fortunate that we have legislators that care about rural Kentucky. A lot of them are here today, including our House Ag and Senate Ag chairman, as well as other members here. It's not a Republican thing, it's not a Democrat thing. We work together, and I personally want to say thank you to our legislators who are here in the audience. And one thing that you can do, as I mentioned on Thursday, is to do a little homework. There's going to be some special elections in January. There's going to be some new people filling some seats that have been held for a very long time, both in the House and Senate, as the new administration transitions. If you have a new House member or Senate or new senator, please take time to introduce yourself to that individual. It helps us when we're working the halls of Frankfort to have that personal connection from someone that actually could vote for that person. They tend to return those phone calls first when it's from a constituent. We have a lot of issues. This past session, I think, was very successful. As Jeff mentioned, we were able to modernize the grain law. A lot of you may not have known this, but we discovered an omission in the law that if you've been farming after 1994, or if you had changed your legal status on your farm after 1994, unbeknownst to a lot of Kentucky farmers, you are not covered by the Grain Indemnity Insurance Fund. We were able to fix that. We were able to scrub it and have a modern grain system that looks like what's going on in other states as well. I was particularly interested in last night's discussion meet, a very well done conversation about cell-based, or like I like to call it, fake meat, and what it's doing to our industry. These are products that on the cell-based lab-grown meat do not exist in grocery stores yet, but there are agriculture organizations. There's 40 companies in the world investing in this technology. It's not going away. And I was telling some folks last night, one of the worst things you can do in agriculture is to ignore an issue and kick the can. It's important to do something that's rare in government, and that's to be proactive, address technology before it hits the consumer shelves, and just ask a Kentucky dairyman or dairy woman how they feel about almonds being classified as dairy or milk. It's so important that we get out and be aggressive. And so we're able to pass, we're one of only 10 states in the country that passed legislation that says if you try to sell those adulterated products, in my opinion, here in Kentucky, you can call it anything you want, you just can't call it meat. And so we're so proud about that, and we're going to continue to be aggressive. And at the end of the day, legislation like this is simply giving consumers what they want, and that's transparency. We have a consumer that's more conscientious than ever about the food choices they make, whether at a farmer's market or at a grocery store. And so it's important that we be able to connect from the farm level to the dinner plate to make sure that they know exactly what they're buying, and we're going to continue to do that. As Jeff mentioned, there's some changes in the tax code. It's so important that whenever the budget is opened up and taxes are changed, that we tell our story to make sure that we maintain those important ag sales tax exemptions and that we provide equity and parity among all the commodity and livestock groups. And that's a fight that we're continuing to have. Our surrounding states do not charge on inputs, so why would we want to unintentionally disadvantage our farmers here in Kentucky? So we're going to be relying upon you to help tell that message. Another thing we're going to be talking about this next session is a pesticides modernization bill. It's mainly a regulatory change at the Department of Agriculture. For the produce farmers in the crowd, we're also going to make sure that we keep the FDA off your farm and implement a Food Safety Modernization Act that is compliant with what Congress directed us to do 8 years ago. This means that we have Kentucky-grown farm kids helping enumerate the issues that the federal law requires without having inspectors hopping on airplanes from Washington, D.C. to come visit your farm who may not know the difference between a soybean and a green bean. So we're going to have a new legislation about Food Safety Modernization Act as well. It's also very important, especially since there's legislators in the crowd. I complimented you first, but I want to make sure that you know that it is Farm Bureau's policy to have a well-funded Department of Agriculture. So I know that you all can agree with me on that as well. So in short, we're going to continue to be vigilant and unapologetic about standing up for the needs of Kentucky agriculture. And the phrase that I like to use most when it comes to passing bills, and again, not just in Frankfort, Washington, D.C., but the local level too, where some of these activist groups have started to set up camp, is that if you don't have a seat at the table, Sometimes you're on the menu, okay? So be involved. If you're asked to participate on an advisory board or one of our boards, or being more involved on your fiscal court or city council, please do that. It's important that we do what's best for our community. On the national level, this time last year, we did not have a farm bill. It had yet to be passed and yet to be signed into law. And one of the priorities that we've done is work with the USDA throughout this entire calendar year with 2018 Farm Bill implementation. And it's so important to realize that there's a lot of changes. The Farm Bill was more so evolutionary than revolutionary. A lot of the programs you saw in the 14 Farm Bill look very similar to what you see in the 18 Farm Bill with a few changes. But we're going to make sure that we try to do what's best with this new federal legislation, including having a conversation that President Haney has had across the Commonwealth this year, and that's about broadband internet. It's time to make sure that in rural Kentucky, that everyone has access to a tool that is absolutely necessary to run a business, a tool that's necessary to attract young people to come back to rural Kentucky. And it is wrong that in some communities, the best internet service is at the local Starbucks or McDonald's. We should have that access on the farm. And if you go to the Farm Machinery Show, now more than ever, our equipment demands connectivity. So we are with you 100% on the conversation about doing what electricity did to our family farms in the 30s and 40s. We want to do that now with broadband as well. I've met with President Trump twice about infrastructure. We've had a great relationship with the EPA and Administrator Andrew Wheeler and the rewrite of WOTUS, so we're going to continue to be very active. And I'm in somewhat of a unique position. Since getting reelected, I'll be serving as president of all the ag commissioners in the South. It's called SASDA, and we'll be hosting a regional conference this next May and June. We might ask a few of you all to be participants in that. And then next year, I'll assume the presidency of all the ag commissioners in the United States with NASDA. This hasn't happened since Billy Ray Smith, and we're so fortunate because it guarantees that we will have access to the White House no matter who wins the presidential election next year. That it's going to be Kentucky in the White House helping advise on agriculture. And speaking of national issues, we have a lot of disruption in trade right now. Trade's my background, and believe me, we're not going to sit on our hands at the Department of Agriculture. We have developed a program where we are going to be both surgical and strategic. For the first time in a very long time, we have a full-time employee dedicated to trade, Tim Hughes. A lot of you all know him. We just got back from Canada a few weeks ago. We had discussions with the Mexicans and the Canadians about USMCA, and it's time to stop bickering about things like the impeachment, and let's actually get something done this calendar year on trade. The single best thing Congress can do to improve markets right now is to pass a trade deal with our biggest buyers. 20% of all of Kentucky's ag exports go north to Canada. And we're so fortunate that Eddie and Joe Kane were able to go to Canada with us last year to make sure that Kentucky had a presence. And we're going to continue to be surgical and strategic, and also look for opportunities now that China has opened up trade on poultry for the first time in 13 years. It appears that we have a full-blown FTA, free trade agreement, with the third biggest economy in the world. Japan has 121 million consumers. They're affluent, they're used to buying American, and they are buying our pork and beef right now, so why not increase that market share? And sometimes it's hard to hit a home run every single time you're at bat with international trade. But lately, we've been hitting a lot of singles and doubles, and they do add up. Because we have a tool in our toolbox that a lot of states don't. We have Kentucky Proud. A lot of states come here. In fact, we had over 30 states come to Kentucky to learn how to better their own marketing programs this year. But when you say you're from Kentucky, it doesn't matter if you're in another country, whether you're in Europe or in Asia or another country like California. When you say you're from Kentucky, they're going to ask you. They're going to ask you about horses, they're going to ask you about bourbon, and they're going to ask you about Colonel Sanders. And guess what? All three of those are signature agriculture products. So we are already light years ahead of other states when it comes to marketing our signature agriculture goods to the 95% of consumers who live outside of the United States. And we're going to continue that. And there's no better way to celebrate Kentucky Proud than to go visit the newest baseball stadium in NCAA sports, Kentucky Proud Park, which was made possible to Kentucky Farm Bureau. And I want to say thank you for giving us an opportunity to share Kentucky Proud and Farm Bureau, and yes, John, UK Athletics, and making sure that we have an anchor facility to celebrate. So I want to say thank you, and you all deserve a round of applause for Kentucky Proud Park. Just a couple more issues. I don't go an hour of my life without fielding a question on hemp. It's a crop, as Will Snell showed this week, represents 1% of farm cash receipts, but consumes probably 30 or 40% of my time, my senior staff's time, and all of the time of Doris Hamilton and her crew. We have put a lot of time and effort into this. We've been very aggressive. And yes, Kentucky is a leading hemp state. There are a lot of farmers making money off hemp this year that are happy with their contracts. They're gearing up for next year. And there are some farmers who've had issues with contracts. There are some processors who I think can do a better job with reinstilling trust between the people growing their product and the people processing it. My advice to you on this is what I've been saying for years. Be careful, take it slow, don't risk more than what you're willing to lose when it comes to hemp. But we do have the opportunity to be first in something instead of last. And we got to do more research, particularly on the animal health side. There's a tremendous potential that hemp could be a feed additive, that we can use that fiber in car parts as well as horse bedding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this year, we have 1,000 brand new jobs that didn't exist just a couple years ago, particularly beyond the farm gate. Full-time jobs, because Kentucky chose to lead. 1,000 farmers growing it, 200 startup companies, and we will exceed $100 million in hemp sales coming from Kentucky this year. And again, this gives us an opportunity to bring back a crop that once flourished here in Kentucky, but we also need to put it in perspective, that it may not be a crop for everybody. There's a lot of risk in the market. The market is immature, and it's in its infancy, and we're using 1940s technology to grow a crop because we don't have modern crop technology for hemp. So be careful and assess your own risk at the farm level. And we're very grateful for Leader McConnell's leadership as well as the rest of our congressional delegation, not just on hemp, but also the Farm Bill as well. One note on the Department of Agriculture. A lot of times you all see our marketing programs, you have interactions with Dr. Stout in our state vet's office. But I'd like to remind you that half of our employees have little, if not nothing, to do with agriculture. They're inspectors. As Jeff mentioned, we're one of the state's largest regulatory agencies. Half of my employees don't have offices in Frankfort. They have trucks. They drive 3 million miles a year across our state to make sure we provide a consumer protection role across our state. And I like to tell people, if you were to buy gas at a gas station, if you were to sell gold at a pawn store, weigh your truck on the side of the road, if you were to check out at any Walmart, Kroger, Houchins, Winn-Dixie across Kentucky, not too many Winn-Dixies left, or if you were to ride a Ferris wheel or get on a zip line, it's the Kentucky Department of Agriculture that plays a consumer protection role. And when Billy Ray Smith left office, he had 430 employees. As of last week, I have 196. And the regulatory responsibilities are not going down, they're going up. We're doing more with less, and the pension obligations are eating our budget every year. So please, if you see a worker, Department of Agriculture in a blue vehicle, the state seal on the side, take time to say thank you for what you do. A lot of those folks are working hard every single day to make sure we get the job done. And so I just want to make sure that you knew what we're doing on the regulatory side. As I said on Thursday, I look forward to getting out on your farms once again. I've been on a lot of your farms. I enjoy farm visits, putting a tailgate down in your truck and having a face-to-face conversation about the issues that matter to you most. So we're going to continue to do that going into 2020. And please let us know how we can be helpful to you. And before I close it up, if you know someone that's in college, preferably studying agriculture, but that's not necessary, that would like to intern at the Kentucky Department of Agriculture, it's one of the few paid internships in Frankfort. These folks will not be making copies. They'll be working. And if you know someone you think would like to apply, the application period is open right now on the KDA website. And in conclusion, I want to leave you with a thought, an idea, and a challenge. Kentucky does a lot of things in agriculture. And we're not just good at it, we're great. Biggest beef cattle state east of Mississippi. We have large specialty crop operations across our state. We have a growing sheep and goat population. We have farmers growing indigo for the organic blue jean market right now. We even have the largest chia farm in North America. We do a lot of different things because we have research capacity from all of our public universities, a very strong extension service based out of UK and KSU. It's time to have a conversation about the role of technology and agriculture. When you think about Boston, you think about healthcare. When you think about Silicon Valley, you think about software and computer development. But if I were to ask you, where is the hub for agriculture technology in the United States? A lot of folks say, I don't know. The reasonable answer is one does not exist. So why not Kentucky? Why not position ourselves, a state that hosts the biggest livestock show in the world, the state that hosts the National Farm Machinery Show, the state that invented an Ebola-fighting vaccine to help save people's lives using tobacco plants, a state that helped invent conservation practices and invented no-till corn planting. Why not let Kentucky be the Silicon Holler of agriculture technology? We have already had conversations with Alltech, our higher ed research institutions, Kentucky Farm Bureau, and others to help develop a framework so that if you are a person with a good idea, come to our state. We'll give you the green space. We'll give you the lab space. And who knows, maybe the next Thomas Edison or Elon Musk or Norman Borlaug of agriculture could be homegrown right here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. It's an honor to be with you this morning. I'll be around for a while. If you have any questions, please let us know how it can be helpful to you. If you like to eat like I do, be sure to thank a farmer. And with that, I want to say thank you for what you do. I hope you have a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. Mark, congrats on 100 years. I look forward to seeing what Kentucky Farm Bureau can do in the next century. Thank you all very much.